السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. قال الله تعالى في شان حبيبي إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه على سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. صلوا عليه صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. Today is the 20th of Rabiul Awwal this year, 1445 Hijri, and last week or last weekend there was a Mawlid in Alpharetta that I was invited to and asked to talk for 15 minutes. So we covered, or at least I started to talk about the last two verses of the Quran that were revealed. So of course you don't have in 15 minutes. In 15 minutes you have a lot of time to talk if the people you're talking to already have the background to what you're saying. When they don't, then 15 minutes you just kind of give them a taste and you move on. So I think I'll cover that today, inshallah, and at least a little bit in more detail. Last two verses of Surah Tawbah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. لقد جاءكم رسول من أنفسكم عزيز عليه ما عنتم حريص عليكم بالمؤمنين رؤوف رحيم فإن تولوا فقل حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. According to Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu anhu, who is considered amongst the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of those who were experts in the Quran. So he says that these were the absolute last two verses of the Quran that were revealed. You have different narrations from various companions talking about various verses being the last. But you have to take all of that into context, because you have certain verses of Risala, verses of Nabuwah, verses of Ahkam. So when they're talking about those being the last, they're talking about those in that context. In the verse in Surah Ma'idah, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا. That today we have chosen Islam as your way and have chosen, or as your deen, and have completed our favors upon you. So this verse, which is part of a verse in Surah Ma'idah, which starts off with Hurramat, forbidden for you. So this is a verse of Ahkam. This verse, of course, was revealed during the Hajj of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the day of Arafah, the 9th of Dhul Hajj. And so, a lot of people feel or think that this is the last verse, but it's not, because there were other verses that were revealed after this. But there were no verses of ahkam, of rulings, that were revealed after this. And all of the other verses that were revealed after this reiterated what had come before. So these two verses, though, of Surah Tawbah, being the last two and final verses of the Quran, in reality give us the essence of the Quran. In oration, the last words or statements that are said should summarize everything that's come before it, which is what these two verses do. So when we look at the verses themselves. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts off with لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ. You know, emphatic statement, surely without a doubt, there has come to you. Rasulun. He could have said Rasul, but he doesn't. He says Rasulun. And in Arabic, tanween and in un has various uses. And when it's used with a title or with a proper name, it's to emphasize status and honor. Azma. So he says, without a doubt there has come to you this exalted messenger. You know, unfortunately, when you read a lot of translations, they'll simply say, oh, there has come to you a messenger. That's not what it's saying. You know, if it said Rasul, then you could say a messenger. But it says Rasulun, this exalted messenger. This messenger of the messengers. The messenger who is the messenger to the messengers. And then he starts giving characteristics of the messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, Rasulun min anfusikum, which is generally translated as from amongst yourselves, which is fine, but Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh, he says that min at times can also be used for tafsil, you know, to draw a similitude to, an analogy to. So min anfusikum here is that he comes to you in the same way that your life comes to you. In Surah Ahzab, النبي أولى بالمؤمنين من أنفسهم, that this Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is closer to the believers than their own nafs, than their own selves, than their own lives. And this is the connection here as well. Min anfusikum, that he comes to you as your life. So when my life is in the body, of course, if my life is taken away from my body, the body is useless. I can't move, I can't do anything, I can't hear, I can't see, I can't talk, I can't think, nothing. But when my life is in the body, now everything works. But also, the life knows every aspect of the body. When I taste something bad, my tongue knows it, but my ear doesn't know it. But my life knows it. When I step on something sharp, my foot knows it, but my elbow doesn't know it, but my life knows it. So he comes to, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, he comes to you as your life. Azizun alayhi ma anittum. And it grieves him what you suffer. You know, life, of course, is suffering. This is Darul Huzn, the world of suffering. You know, patients come to me and they say, this hurts. And so if it doesn't hurt, you don't know your life. You're alive. You know, this delusion that many people are now living in, that, oh, you know, happily ever after and no pain. And that's not reality. Everyone suffers. And the characteristic that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing out about the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam is azizun alayhi ma anittum. It grieves him what you suffer. But in order to suffer, in order to grieve, you have to know what you're suffering. There is no grieving without knowing. Simple example of this is father and son Son moves away. They're very close. Son dies. 3 days later, the father receives the news of his son's death. And for those 3 days when he didn't know anything, life was as usual. Getting up, doing whatever, enjoying himself. Now when he receives the news, now the people can't console him. He can barely get up. Why wasn't he like this before for the 3 days? Because he didn't know. So in order to grieve, you have to know what you're suffering. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the characteristics of this Rasul, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that it grieves him what you suffer. So in order for him to grieve, he has to know what I suffer. He has to know what we all suffer. Otherwise, how is he going to grieve what we suffer? And we'll come back to this point. Harisun alaykum. And he is concerned over you. He is anxious over you. Parents, and they're always anxious over their children because they want their children to do the right thing. They want their children to succeed. They don't want any difficulties or any suffering for their children. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, this is the characteristic of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Harisun alaykum. That he is anxious over us. And we'll get to the over who in a minute. The parents, they always keep up with the children. What are they doing? How are they doing? To make sure that they're doing right. Again, they can't be anxious over their children if they don't know what the children are doing. It comes back to that aspect of knowledge. But also the aspect of love. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam being anxious over us, being concerned over us, is infinitely greater than the parents over the children. Because he's anxious that we do the right thing, so that in the hereafter we don't suffer. And then bil mu'minina ra'ufur rahim. And to the believers he is Ra'uf, kind, and he is Rahim, merciful. When we look at this final statement, several aspects. Everything has many aspects. One is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifies bil mu'minina ra'ufur rahim. For the other characteristics he didn't specify. Here he specifies. Yet we know Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is rahmatul lil alameen. He is a mercy to all of creation. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Rabbul Alameen. He is the Lord of all of creation, all of the worlds. So wherever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a Rabb, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Rahmah. He is that mercy. Of course, nothing can exist without the mercy of Allah, and who is the mercy of Allah other than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And that gets into a little different aspect. So he is mercy over all of creation, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifies here, bil mu'minina ra'ufur rahim. That to the believers he is Ra'uf, he is kind, and he is merciful. Because they are the ones who will truly benefit from his kindness and his mercy. You know, again, coming back, you know, the parents, they are merciful to their children. But if the children do things that cause the parents to be harsh with them, that's not the fault of the parents. That's the fault of the children. And so the ones who truly will benefit eternally from his mercy, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the believers. But when we look at the other characteristics, and even this characteristic, the question comes, who does all this apply to? Min anfusikum, that he comes to you as your life. Azizun alayhi ma'anittum, that it grieves him what you suffer. Harisun alaykum, he is anxious or concerned over you. So who does this apply to? And in order to know who all of this applies to, you have to look at the word Rasul. Because all of these are the descriptions of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So now the question comes, who is he the Rasul to? He is the messenger to whom? To all of creation. He is not only the messenger to mankind, but he's also the messenger to jinn kind, to the angels, to all of those creations that we know and all of the creations we don't know, to the animals, to everything. Bibi Shifa radiallahu anha, the mother of Abdul Rahman bin Auf radiallahu anha, who was there when he was born, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She says that when she was leaving the house, she saw the donkeys of Makkah hugging each other and the animals of Makkah congratulating each other, and she heard this, that today the one who will give us all rights has come. So again, he's not only the messenger to mankind, but he's the messenger to all of creation. So these characteristics of the Rasul are the characteristics of the Rasul to all of creation. But then other people say, well, when? And again, we come back to the word Rasul. So for when he is the Rasul, all of these characteristics apply from the time he was the Rasul until the time he is no longer the Rasul. Which of course doesn't exist. Neither one of these exist. Because I can't say from the time that he was the Rasul, because he was already a Rasul before time existed. In the Quran, Surah Al-Imran, verse 81, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? He reminds his Rasul, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his beloved, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَإِذْ أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِيثَاقَ النَّبِيِّينَ لَمَا آتَيْتُكُم مِّن كِتَابٍ وَحِكْمَةٍ ثُمَّ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مُصَدِّقٌ لِّمَا مَعَكُمْ لَتُؤْمِنُنَّ بِهِ وَلَا تَنصُرُنَّهُ قال أقررتم وأخذتم على ذلكم إسري قال أقررنا وأخذتم على ذلك إسري قالوا أقررنا قال فاشهدوا وأنا معكم من الشاهدين. And remember, again addressing his beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you remind the one who was there. I can't say and remember to someone who wasn't there when whatever incident I'm talking about. He says, and remember when Allah took the covenant from the prophets that you are given the book and the wisdom. Meaning what? That you will be given prophethood. This is the covenant for them to be given prophethood. This is before anyone has come to this world. That you are given the book and the wisdom, and then comes to you Again, Rasulun, this exalted messenger. So they are وَإِذْ أَخَذَ اللَّهُ مِيثَاقَ النَّبِيِّينَ. Nabi. You know, they're being given Nabuwah. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is already being introduced to them as Rasul. That you will be given the book and the wisdom, and then comes to you this exalted Rasul. Do you believe in him and give him help? And do you take this covenant as binding upon you? And they said, yes. And he says, then be a witness over each other, and I am a witness over you all. Such a binding covenant that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I am a witness over you all. He's a witness anyway, but he emphasizes this point here. So from when was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam Rasul? We can't say. Because in order to answer the question when, you have to know what time. This is even before time existed. So he was Rasul then, whatever then means. He was Rasul when Adam as-Salam was sent to this earth. He was Rasul when he was born. He was Rasul when he declared his prophethood. And who is the Rasul today? Other than Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And who will be Rasul tomorrow and the next day? And who will be the Rasul on the day of Qiyamah other than Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And beyond that, when time no longer matters, so these characteristics of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam are there with him from his beginning, and they continue on. So they apply to all of creation, and they apply to all of time. And so coming back to Azizun alayhi ma anittum, that he knows it grieves him what you suffer. And again, grieving requires knowledge. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as one of the characteristics of this Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that he is aware of the condition of all of creation and all of time. This is the way he has created this Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, and there are other verses, because as I said, these two verses are in reality the essence of the Quran. They are summaries of the Quran. And so there are other verses that tell us the same thing in different ways. One of them, of course, the famous verse, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. So how can he be a mercy to me if he doesn't know me? You know, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, when Ibrahim al-Islam is being thrown into the fire, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't simply command the fire to be cool on Ibrahim. If you look in a microscope, frostbite and a burn from a fire look the same. It's the same. Whether you burn by fire or you burn by coldness, the body reacts the same. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala simply ordered the fire to be cool on Ibrahim alayhi salam, it would have burned him. But a different way. But he didn't say that. He said, Bardan wa salamun ala Ibrahim. Be cool and peace upon Ibrahim. So there's that measurement of the coolness. Many things that we think are good for us, that are good for us, you take them to a different level and now they become bad for us. Water. I keep telling my patients, you need to drink more water. You need to drink more water because everybody's drinking Coke. They think Coke is water. They've been brainwashed into this. But there is a such thing as drinking too much water. You drink too much water and you also die. A few years ago, there was a high school football player that, at football practice, he drank 4 gallons of water. Washed out his sodium, he had a seizure and died. And yet, if I don't have water, I also die. So everything has to be in balance. And the balance for each one is not the same. What may be too much for one person may not be enough for another person. And so how can he be a mercy if he doesn't know the condition? So again, Azizun alayhi ma anittum. He has to know. But the last part of this verse, بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. Ar-Ra'uf is the name of Allah. Ar-Rahim is the name of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is praising His Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam with all of these titles that we use in language. You look throughout the Quran, various titles. But for the reality of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, none of these titles do him justice. There are no words, because language is limited, that do him justice. Just like the names of Allah, the characteristics of Allah that we talk about, again, these are limited words. The reality of Allah, we will never know. So these words, we use these so we have some notion or some idea. They don't do him justice. So the same thing here. All of these words and praises don't do him justice, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now He gives him His own titles. And this is something that is exclusive to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You don't find this with any other prophet. Only for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the last 2 minutes, we'll just quickly go over the last verse. فَإِن تَوَلَّوْا فَقُلْ حَسْبِيَ اللَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُوَ. And if they reject, if they refuse, if they deny. So if they deny that you know their condition at all times, حَرِيسٌ عَلَيْكُمْ, عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ. If they deny that you are concerned over them, if they deny that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed His own titles upon you, then, oh my beloved, simply say to them, enough for me, sufficient for me is Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is as-samad. He is not in need of anything. He has created His Habib sallallahu as samad, that He only needs His Lord. He doesn't need anything. He doesn't need the oxygen, He doesn't need the food, He doesn't need the water, He's not in need of anything. Everything is in need of Him. And He showed us this on the night of Mi'raj. For those who couldn't see it before. So again, if someone denies Him, and denies His characteristics that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to him, simply say to them, Allah is enough for me. Us accepting him or denying him makes no difference for him. Whether we believe in Allah or not, doesn't matter. Allah is Allah. Whether we accept Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or not, doesn't matter to him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already given him this status. Time's up. I thought I'd finish, but so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to at least see a glimpse into the reality of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And may he fill our hearts with his true love and the true love of his beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his family and his companions and all of those whom they love, inshallah. Those who have not made sunnah, go and make sunnah.